Today we're talking about femininity in America, asking how are we defining femininity and how are these definitions negatively impacting our girls and women? We'd love for you to join us in our conversation by calling us at 415-663-8492. And you know, as I was preparing for the show, I realized that for many of the women in my generation, if you wanted to be a doctor, you married a doctor. It's kind of dating my and revealing my age, but nonetheless, that was the general ethos of the time. So obviously, things have improved in some ways. More women are in college and medical school now than men, but the imbalance remains. The cultural images and expectations for girls and women are far off the path leading to natural femininity. Girls and women respond by becoming someone often contrary to their true essence. This disconnect often cultivates disempowerment, lack of self-esteem and confidence. It promotes womanhood without authenticity. Feelings of self-worth are abandoned in order to contour to the distorted visions of what a woman is and ignores her transcendence into what she is truly capable of becoming. The results are similar to what is happening to our boys and men, and we discussed this in an earlier show. These imbalances prevent people from developing their natural, glorious selves and often leads to serious, sometimes fatal depression. Wherever there is significant imbalance, there is also destruction. Whoever has the power warps us and takes us further away from our true selves. Women's value, as depicted in television, music, movies, online, and in magazines, teaches us that their youth, beauty, and sexuality, and not their capacity, for example, to be leaders, are what is to be valued. In the last 10 years, and this is a real shocker, the rates of depression among girls and women have doubled. Maybe it's because of the rise of the Kardashians. I don't know. Globally, in 2014, the leading cause of death in teenage girls 15 to 18 was suicide. So we're asking, how do these images and content in our media negatively impact the development of our girls and women? With teenagers spending an average of 10 hours and 45 minutes in media consumption a day, they're constantly being exposed to programming that demeans femininity. These distorted values results in a disconnect that cultivates disempowerment, lack of self-esteem, and confidence. It promotes womanhood without authenticity. Feelings of worth are abandoned in order to contour to the distorted visions of what a woman is and ignores her transcendence. One out of 7 women experience sexual dating violence among children as young as 6 to 8 years old. Half the girls and 1/3 of the boys think they should be thinner. Now, these are kids 6 to 8. Women are 51% of the population, yet only 17% of them are in Congress. And we've talked so often on this show how important it is for women to step into leadership and to bring the other side to all of these discussions. It's important for women to read other women's stories, to write their own stories. And yet, when you look at the facts of who's putting out these stories, 17% of all directors, producers, writers, cinematographers are women working in top-grossing films. 17%. Mm-hmm. The rest is the male point of view. So it's not all about... it is. It's all about the body and not about the brain. And this brings us to this shocking information. Now, this really blew my mind. Teenage girls increasingly are requesting labiaplasty to get the perfect designer vagina. Very young women are going under the knife to sculpt parts that are still growing and changing, which is like horrifying. I mean, it is horrifying. It is horrifying. So, never underestimate. This is a quote from Callie Holloway, on Alternet. She said, never underestimate the power of beauty myths to manufacture inadequacies where before there were none. A little over a decade ago, labiaplasty, the partial or wholesale removal of parts of the labia minora, a.k.a. the inner vaginal lips, was a relatively obscure plastic surgery compared with nips and tucks and lifts to other various parts. In more recent years, the number of women opting for the surgery has grown exponentially. Now, very young women, girls in their teens, are requesting this procedure in numbers growing so quickly that even some practitioners are concerned. So one theory is that these days teens are seeing photoshopped images of so-called idealized bodies. It's inevitable that our increasingly plastic or silicone culture will trickle down to kids, and that's exactly what's happening. Mm-hmm. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons estimates that since 2000, the number of cosmetic surgeries overall has increased 115%. So, what do you think, guys?
It sounds like big business to me.
Yes.
It's that is ridiculous and scary. The teenage girls. I mean, what is the perfect vagina? If we're going to talk about that, I mean,
well, they see these photoshopped, perfectly.
Where are they seeing them?
Well, online.
Really?
Oh, sure.
Oh my God.
I know, and with Photoshop. I mean, but the whole question is...
This reminds me, Paul, when you brought in circumcision. I mean, immediately we go to this level that I start getting squeamish at. Because when I think of femininity in our culture, I clearly see a lot of dysfunction. And what you're saying, Mary, I don't disagree with at all. But you said so many things that I want to respond to a few of them.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went on and on.
Well, I just wanted to comment. In the studio, there's 33% are women, but they use up 99% of the time already.
Ooh.
No, just kidding.
Kidding. You shouldn't have said that, Bernie.
Well, and one of the things you commented on was gains over time. And our society has made gains over time, so that indeed there are a lot of accomplished women. Now, when we did our show on patriarchy, part of what we see in our culture is that women have to sort of practice the male tactics, often in the corporate hierarchy, to move up the ladder, and in many ways give up some of what they would maybe more naturally be as feminine in order to be successful in the patriarchy. So there's been that trade-off. But the movies and the TV, it's all still primarily men. But I do want to point out that, like, I watched the show Madam Secretary, which is a little bit like we had a real female secretary in Hillary Clinton, where the head character is a very strong woman, does it very competently. So we are getting to see changes. But when we talk about girls, for me, I'm always so disheartened when I see young girls feeling like they have to show off their breasts or really be sexual. And I know that comes from peer pressure. I know it comes from the media pressure. And I'm really discouraged by it. But I also have a 13-year-old granddaughter who feels a lot of pressure. That peer pressure at that age and in middle school is tremendous.
It's tremendous.
And the boys will bully the girls. The boys will bully other boys. The girls will bully other girls. The girls don't bully the boys. But it's like this bullying thing and wanting to be accepted is a huge part. So it's hard to blame the individuals who get pulled along in this imagery that indeed is so prevalent in our culture.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the writers of those images, because what is being valued is so empty. It's like that's, it isn't that, there's peer pressure with every, when kids are growing up, there's going to be peer pressure.
Right.
But what are they putting pressure on?
Yeah.
And it just seems
it's the clothes they wear. Like those sneakers are like terrible or they don't fit. It's about the craziest things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the media in continuing this stereotype of sexy women to sell products only do that because it works. It brings in the money. Somehow we males salivate at that image and then want to go buy the product. So that hamburger that sexy woman is holding up now looks more delicious to us.
And the young girl watching that thinks that she has to look
Exactly.
like that in order to be attractive and to belong.
Yeah.
The Washington Post cites statistics indicating there were 15.9 million surgical and minimally invasive cosmetic procedures, think Botox, etc., performed in 2015. That means 1 in 16 people, I'll repeat that, 1 in 16 people had something done to get a little closer to their, or shall I say, the media-induced idea of perfection. 2015 was also dubbed the year of the rear and states that there was a buttock procedure every 30 minutes of every single day on average. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it is. But in addition to that, not as severe is all of these people, both male and female, going to the gym obsessively to meet some ideal look, rather than living life and sharing with other people. They're on that treadmill. They're on that elliptical machine, and it's all about firming, and they feel better than doing it in surgery, and I would have to agree, but I think it's along the same lines of being guided by this stereotypical image that is going to be very hard for us to lose.
Right. For sure, our distorted vision of femininity is causing damage all over the place. We have to go a little deeper into what femininity is supposed to be, I guess, the actual idea of the feminine as a thing. Charles Schultz, who was on this show not long ago, sent an email, and he said that the problem for both men and women is that they see life itself as participation within systems and institutions which have destructive designs.
Good
bureaucracies and corporations.
Yeah.
The
I sure
problem
agree
is a
with
lack
that.
of choice.
Yes, me too.
There's no way for women to be women or men to be men in whatever sense we might think of as ideal in such a system. All must conform to its demands or not have enough money to pay for their smartphones.
Good point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. I'm glad you're a good listener on the show, regular listener, and you call in and you come in. So keep the comments coming.
Speaking of callers, we have one. Hi, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, Paul. This is Mia.
Hey, Mia.
Hi, Mia.
Hi, calling.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're blanking out a little bit. You're going in and out on yourself.
Maybe I'll call back on a different.
Okay, yeah.
That would be good.
Call back.
All right. Anyway, so yes, what is?
So the
how do we
definition.
define femininity?
It's a little bit circular, I find. Like femininity, I think formally has some definition about those traits that are more typically found in women or something. It's almost like self-defining around women are feminine by definition. So is that meet with your thoughts of definition,
Well, I
Mary?
mean, I think we can say there are certain, if we look to nature, there are certain qualities that are, typically feminine.
Like
which
the
is
nurturing?
The nurturing, the
more cooperation, less competition?
much more collaborative.
Yeah.
And it just seems that in today's world, those qualities are valued and needed more, not valued, but needed more than ever before. Because if you look at the world, we see a result of no real power to the woman's voice, which brings in, you need both. I mean, if we didn't have the masculine energy, nothing would ever get done. Okay, so I'm not knocking, everyone has their place, but the women give a whole other energy that is like softening to some of the more
competitive and aggressive.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
if competition is without restraint, we get wars.
We
Who's
love
got
that.
the biggest genitals? I mean, this is what's
Guns.
Yeah, exactly. It's just such a metaphor to unbridled, with energy that doesn't value the feminine energy. We have a caller?
We do. Hi, Mia. Is that you again?
Hi, it is. Yes,
Hey.
hi, Paul.
Gotcha.
Enjoying the discussion today.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention something I've been kind of thinking in terms of media and showing, like, quote-unquote strong women. And I think there's, been an increase sort of in the sort of super superpower, aggressive, fighting type of strong woman. And I mean, I think that's great and it has its place, and I think it's interesting to see that and to see that accompanied by the men version, you know. But I think what's really powerful and which I would like to see more of is a little bit more realistic strong woman, and perhaps maybe a woman who's not as aggressive being a strong woman in the way that they stand up for themselves or stand up for other things that they believe in. And I don't think there's as many examples of that. There's often sort of a sassy, aggressive woman depicted, and you don't see as many sort of kind, strong women with a backbone that stand up for themselves. And I really love seeing that. And an example, there's a show called Jane the Virgin, and if anyone is out there, I think she's a really good example of that. She's a feminine woman. She's not really aggressive, but when it comes down to it, she always stands up for her belief system, no matter who she encounters, and I really appreciate that.
Mia, maybe you're too young. I used to watch these old Western shows, and often they depicted a strong woman who was in charge of the home. And, the men obviously had to conform when they came in, and she was strong in terms of providing for the family and keeping order and stuff. Do you think those images were helpful?
Yeah, I don't really think it even matters what the woman is doing as much. I think it's more a matter of the fact that she's asserting her character and isn't afraid to, even if it's just verbal, to stand up for what she thinks is right and sort of like call people out on things.
Kind of like Elizabeth Warren.
Thing that we don't see as much, especially on TV. There's not a lot of people sort of saying, hey, you know what, that doesn't feel right, that doesn't sit right with me. I don't see that action from women.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I love when I see it. And
I agree 1,000%. And I think that is a reflection of the earlier statistic that I mentioned, that only 17% of the writers, cinematographers, editors, producers, directors are women. And women must be able to tell their stories and not just be macho women, but women who get to reveal that there can be great strength and wisdom in collaboration and compassion, which maybe are two of the biggest qualities that we are most lacking in our culture right now.
Exactly, and you don't have to humiliate the man, you don't have to beat up the man, you don't have to even fight with the man, but just sort of asserting your equality and asserting your opinion when you feel like it's right. I think that's probably the most powerful thing that especially young women can see.
I agree.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
I watch the Academy Awards a lot, and I do see that women get honored, and then women are also getting into director roles and producer roles, not in the numbers, it's small numbers.
It's a tiny percentage.
Yeah, but what I'm still looking for is women to start shunning the big gown, the high heels, the super sexy look, and starting to say, when I'm being honored like this, how about I just come a little more, I don't know, less to that stereotype of the Barbie doll. I don't see a lot of these women doing that.
Well, I don't think that would happen until we get stories that reflect the importance of full-blown womanhood.
The characters they play often are more real. Then they go up on stage to get their Oscar, and then they fit this image.
All wearing Versace and
I don't understand why women allow men to push them into high heels. I mean, I know why men find that attractive, because the calves stick out a little more and a little taller, and it's really like they're vulnerable. But it seems to me you're disadvantaging yourself in terms of being able to walk, to run away, to do a lot of things.
Maybe that's exactly why men like it. I don't know.
Exactly. But why do women conform so much to that
it's
fashion?
Programming. Once again, it's programming. If these things are valued, these things are going to be copied. If these things are considered attractive, and you're programmed, relentlessly that this is what is to make you, a better woman, women follow. And again, it's the stories that are being told that, what's interesting is that right now, I think it was Jane Fonda, Meryl Streep, and some other fabulous actress in Hollywood who I can't remember. Sally Field, not Sally Field, Reese Witherspoon. They have formed their own production company. And they've recognized that, these different stories have to be told about women. I mean, with, what's her name, Anne Hathaway being rejected because she's too old. You know what I mean?
What?
Yeah, that just happened on a big movie.
What is she, 30?
Yeah, probably. And... I think that this is going to be a wonderful thing if they can manage to pull this off, because stories, the culture depends on stories, and stories shape thought.
Once it becomes part of the sort of storytelling culture, that becomes accepted as, you start taking things for granted. That's how all these myths of femininity and masculinity and all that got started. People just started accepting it as fact because they heard about it so often, or they saw it so often on TV. Anyway, thank you, Mia. That was a great call. The line is open, 663-8492.
One of the things you mentioned early on, Mary, too, was about 17% of Congress being women. And ideally, in a democracy representing about 50-50, we'd like to see 50-50. But that 17% is up from what it started off.
Oh, sure. Just like medical school.
Zero. Yeah.
It's better, but there's still this huge
And there
imbalance.
is this group now, Emily's List, that collects money and gives it to women running for usually Democratic but progressive seats, and gives that extra spur to women. They're supporting Hillary right now because she's the only woman running for president, but they support women at all levels, at local levels, and that's where indeed people are saying we need to put a lot of effort is start electing more women locally.
But
now, Marin, and we did a show on this subject before, and like Murray Seward, who's a frequent listener and commenter, our show pointed out, we in West Marin here have a lot of women leading a lot of organizations. So here we're not the stereotype that we're talking about so much, because we have indeed sort of encouraged and fostered women taking more leadership than many places.
True.
And I just wanted to throw that out in that it's not hopeless, because we are seemingly moving in the right direction. And I suggest a lot of that happens because of women stepping up, stepping out, and pushing the cause.
Well, I see it kind of more in a more Dickinsonian kind of way. I think this is like the best of times and the worst of times. We're seeing the women step up, but then we're also seeing a total caricature at the same time on the other end of it, which is amplified by the amount of time young people especially spend in social media and are bombarded by the contrary images of this. So, you see...
But wasn't that caricature there when you were young? It was there when I was young. Playboy existed.
But it was
that's
so...
a caricature.
Yeah, but we weren't spending 10 hours a day being bombarded with these images.
How long was I using that magazine to look at the centerfold? You have no idea. Just kidding. Yes, we didn't have as much media of any kind.
It wasn't so pervasive. It wasn't so relentless. It wasn't attached to buying, which is now, there didn't have the marketing aspect to it. I mean, a little bit.
Yes, it did.
Not as much. Not as much,
You watched
Bernie.
Mad Men on TV, and you watched those early ads where they're selling
I was working in
automobiles.
advertising. I was in Mad Men.
But they had these scantily dressed women on the hood of a car.
No, I'm not saying it didn't exist. I was in that environment for many, many years. What I'm saying is that environment existed, but it wasn't as powerful or pervasive or omnipresent as it is now. Now, not in West Marin because we're protected here, but when your kids go into high school and then on to college, they're going to be exposed to this even more so.
Well, yeah.
So, yes, it's always existed. It's a question of degree. It's a question of degree. And when you see the numbers of, kids basically mutilating themselves to conform to that, when you see the increase in suicide, the number one cause of death in teenage girls is suicide, why do you do that? Because you're depressed, you have no power, you think you're not good enough. This is shocking.
Yeah,
and
but it's in young men too.
No, yeah, young men too. I'm not saying one has it more.
Okay.
I'm just saying that it's much more powerful now because of the power of the media. We just, I've said this before on the show, and Saturday we hit the screen door. We were out in the woods playing all day until it got dark. And now everybody's on their phone, and not everybody, but the pervasiveness of
Media,
just
digital.
being bombarded has
Entertainment.
resulted in look at the statistics on the kids and suicide. I mean, that's enough. If that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what a wake-up call is.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, but I do want to temper it just a little bit. There's no question that our society is dysfunctional, and there's no question that that coincides with a time where media and social media and the many digital ways that we consume media it's just exploded. So these things have all exploded at the same time.
Yeah.
So the dysfunction is maybe in our society is clearly where kids and adults are finding it problematic to find themselves in an authentic way so that they're comfortable in their own skin, and is leading to many of these suicides and stuff.
I mean, for kids to worry about their weight at 6 years old, and for kids to be offing themselves as a young teenager, that's a canary in the coal mine if I ever heard one.
But I would suggest that the anorexia and the bulimia in girls has existed for a long time. In other words, the standard that our patriarchy has set for women. I know there was a time, maybe 200 years or 300 years ago or whatever, Renaissance time, where plump and fatter women were the more desirable bodies. So cultures can change what they view as desirable, but clearly in my lifetime, it's always been the skinny woman with the big breasts and the sexy manner that is the stereotypically top of the pyramid.
I think the Barbie doll was the most iniquitous piece of trash that was ever created. That's done more harm to culture, to girls and women than anything else, because it's a symbol of what they are supposed to look like.
Yeah,
which
and you
would
start
be,
playing with those dolls at 6 years old,
right.
And then
or younger.
What do you think of the fact that we still have the Miss America, Miss Universe, and these contests where women, of course, there's a bigger element of talent now and asking a question and poise, but still basically it's the swimsuit competition that everybody tunes in for, and it's a glorification of the female body as a way to, make money, number one, and Trump is a big, owner of a lot of that enterprise.
That says everything right there.
Yeah, and the images that I see of him all the time now. He's surrounded, of course, by his wife, who was from Miss Universe winner, and other gorgeous looking women. And he is that example of having trophy women around him, trophy wife. And somehow for males, that is the epitome, is if you
don't
can
say
have
but that's not all males.
No,
Plenty of males are waking up and they want someone who's smart, too, and sensitive. And,
Yes. I use the same way you did. Falsely generalizing here, but so many women in the context of what you've been saying that's wrong with our society. Yeah.
I'd like to ask both of you, gentlemen, what are if you may not have ideas on this, but what do you feel would be effective in changing this paradigm?
Boy, I love that. How much time do I get? I mean, I think it's so deep within our a structure that comes down to private property ownership. It's part of capitalism in a way. It's part of a centralized hierarchical system where those who have the power and assert it manipulate. And one of the ways they manipulate is through these definitions of gender. And they also manipulate through religious beliefs and through Republican versus Democrat belief. And so there's a lot of manipulation within the system. And I don't think we can be free of that without sort of freeing ourselves from this model where we have a hierarchical system at the nation and we are almost powerless locally. So I want to collapse and invert that structure so that most of the power resides within our local communities, and where we get back to this idea of we have a council of elders who we go to help resolve disputes that arise within the village, and that the village turns out to be a nicer balance of this action drive that you attribute to maleness and this nurturing cooperation and collaboration that we attribute to femininity. And it doesn't have to be male, female, sexes only. We have certainly learned that we can have different forms of gender identity within our mix of people, and that diversity that a local system would foster would be a lot healthier, in my opinion. Now, I don't know how you bring that about, but I see it as welcoming a collapse of our global economic system. I know that sounds far afield of the gender issues that we're talking about, but I think it's definitely related.
It's so driven by the capitalist system. I mean, what if just the plastic surgeons were taken to task over doing these operations in the first place? I mean, what if they just said, when a 13-year-old girl comes in and says, I want a vaginalectomy or whatever it's called, and he said, no. How about that? Instead of charging $5,000 or whatever he's going to do so he can buy his boat or whatever.
Well, short of banning it, like when we talk about labeling for GMOs, I've always said, why don't we just ban them? Well, here, why don't we go the other way? Why don't we just label with a tattoo? Every time that some surgical work was done, a tattoo has to be added that says surgically altered.
Going back to the, to bring it down to the community and the culture. If you look again to indigenous cultures, often when there are issues, let's say the men's council, they have all the structural leadership, so to speak. But when it comes to issues that pertain to life, they go to the women's council, because the women will babysit on their kidneys for 9 months, and they have a different opinion of life and the value of life. So they go, if it's a life and death issue, they go to the Women's Council and they ask their opinion of this, and that is gospel.
Yeah.
Their decision determines what is going to be happening on that level.
And it reminds me...
And we could do that locally.
We could.
That's possible. You don't have to change the whole world to have the Women's Council.
The Iroquois model was that the women selected the male from their village who would be their representative to go to the regional place where maybe war decisions were made. But they could decide to send somebody that was, because of circumstances, who was very strong and warlike, or they could send someone who was more peace-oriented because they didn't see the need for war. So it gave women that ultimate authority and then gave it to the men to execute.
Yes, and they got to watch that boy grow up.
Exactly.
They know exactly what kind of kid that it grew and what kind of man he came from.
Exactly.
And that is real powerful information.
Well, there's no doubt that in societies post-hunter-gatherer indigenous times, mostly because of religion. Religion was created. Christianity, certainly, with the myth of Virgin Mary and all that other stuff, was about controlling women, right? To make sure that one man, one woman in marriage in holy matrimony, so that he knew that it was his child. It was all that control thing. In all in religion-based cultures after the indigenous people culture, after the hunter-gatherers, where women became property and were controlled, that we're still operating on that image of femininity. We're still operating on the sort of mother saint whore, this kind of dichotomy thing. Well, men are all slathering over breasts and booties, and women are being taught to cater to that, and they have been taught to cater to that for a long time. And so there's a lack of power, a lack of trust in the feminine is what I usually call it, the feminine, whatever, spirit.
Or it's demeaned,
Right. And so women themselves, a lot of women themselves, including these teenage girls, have a lack of trust in their own feminine intuition, in their own feminine knowledge, in their own feminine energy. And it's a terrible thing to do to half a population.
Yeah, because the men suffer as a result too. I mean, everybody loses when people don't feel whole.
Right.
I've noticed in some part of our Western culture, but like maybe Hispanic culture, the men have both a reverence for their mother and a feeling, and then have a chauvinistic attitude to their mates or whatever. But what I feel like in our Anglo version of Western culture, we've somehow lost that respect for the mother and the family. I think we've given a lot of give in to the power of money. And sometimes the women have the purse strings, but most of the time the men control the money. Therefore, the men are controlling things. And I think if we're wanting change, we have to look to women to help make that change happen. Now, clearly there are men that are more sympathetic to that change and want to see that change, and they will vote, etc. But I don't see men as leading the charge to greater equality, just like Gloria Steinem and others who were leaders in the feminist movement, and they may have made a few bad choices or whatever difficulty. There's growing pains in changing this stereotype, but I think that needs to continue. So I like the fact there's an Emily's list that promotes women getting into politics, and I see it more and more. I mean, women are indeed feeling that they have a chance of taking a leadership role, where in the past maybe they didn't even try because they thought it was like impossible.
I think it's interesting that, just a side note here, that they're supporting Hillary when it's actually Bernie who is demonstrating more of the feminine qualities. You know, to me, Hillary is like as macho as they come. This is just a political aside.
Oh, yeah.
And Bernie is the one who's speaking compassion. So it's
Hillary
very interesting.
learned that what a lot of women executives learn is that to compete in this man's world, you have to develop those tactics.
Exactly.
And she's mastered them. And so I remember how much respect I had for Hillary when she said, I'm not staying home to bake cookies or whatever she said. And when she was saying, you've elected Bill, but you get me too. You got two of us. And she was willing to take on health care. And I was really quite pleased that she was a role model and she continued that. And so I think we can view her as having achieved tremendous in American politics for what women are capable of doing. And I understand a lot of women wanting to see that last step, but it is ironic that she now has competition from the feminine side, if you will, or from the left or from the progressive side. It's quite interesting to watch.
Paul, you've done so much research in your book, Seduction Redefined.
Yes. Available at bookstores now.
Yes, as I said to you before, I think that's a really important book because it addresses a lot of the what do I want to say, foundational reasons why all of this is happening. So based on your research, do you have any comments about what would be the most effective ways to turn this in a better direction?
Oh boy!
I know it's a big one.
Yeah, I guess as we all think, the greater participation of women in politics, in business, in starting their own businesses, not trying to work their way up the corporate ladder necessarily, but and women who are strong in their feminine side, not necessarily in them. I mean, we're all a mix of masculine and feminine, you know, and sometimes a woman needs to tap into the masculine to get things done or focus or whatever, just as men should be tapping into their feminine side to see the bigger picture of things and have more, perhaps, empathy or compassion. Women who are treated as equal and women who have the trust in their own feminine strengths and won't let them be belittled. I think that's and how do you achieve that? I don't know. I think just more women involved in positions of, you know, in the hierarchy that exists, but working to dissolve that hierarchy and making it more horizontal, you know. That would be the key, the horizontal instead of the hierarchy, right?
That's called anarchy.
Golly, you're on the air, and it sounds like you're outside. What's your name, please?
Yes, this is Murray.
Oh, hi, Murray.
Hi, Murray.
We name-dropped you already once.
I'm on the campus of College Marin.
Oh, nice.
I sent a few tweets in, but then I heard.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's all right. You're not reading tweets. The reception over here is just perfect. I'm using the internet.
Good.
So it's good to know that the show is potentially reaching the whole world.
One listener at a time.
So while sitting here, I did some Google stuff, and I just wanted to just respond to the idea that this is both the best of times and the worst of times. And I see that, for example, 30, 40 years ago, I looked up on lawyers and doctors. Women were 10%, and now graduating, they're well over 40%. Now, the statistics, and one of my tweets said statistics that you can't rely on it too much. Many women doctors and lawyers drop out more than men in their 30s and 40s, and people are trying to figure out why they're dropping out.
Oh, they have children.
I'm sorry?
They have children.
I don't know, because I actually didn't.
Well, I think that's a pretty fair guess.
Well, but the same article that I was reading said that there's a trend now to try to set up things where women could work part-time so that they could do families. I mean, it is complicated. I see that in the 114th Congress, there were 108 women, which was a record number. It's not equal. There's still a big gap. But on the other hand, I wouldn't characterize it as the worst of times. And so I guess what I'm saying when we say it's the worst of times, it would really want to tease out a lot of what's going on. The other thing I was saying, I was just eyeballing here, my granddaughter's in a class where the professor is a woman. I'm going to get a colonoscopy in about a week, and it's going to be done by a woman who is half owner or whatever of the group. I mean, she's not just a worker there; she's one of the managers of a place where I think when I was a kid, I doubt that there were many women doctors who were running practices with lots of doctors. So what I'm saying is that I agree that there's a lot of problems, but I guess I don't agree with the idea that this can be characterized as the worst of times for women. Well,
the reason I said that is the suicide rate of teenage girls, and actually the suicide rate of teenage boys. I mean, these are dramatic. To me, this is the worst of times in that area. And it's true, there's been great strides made with women all over the globe, but there is also the counterpoint of that, which is a really extremely destructive influence on how media is portraying women, so that girls and boys, but we're talking about girls on this show, just don't feel they're enough or good enough. And when you don't feel you're enough and good enough, there's trouble ahead. And the statistics back that up, Murray.
I haven't studied suicide, so I don't know. I know in Palo Alto there was a whole bunch of suicides. And if I remember reading the articles right, a lot of the kids, I think there was a lot of pressure in the school. Those schools were very, very competitive. My daughter went to school in Palo Alto. And the kids could be, in other words, it could reflect stress to achieve rather than negative views of women. There could be many factors. But when I look at the women that I actually know, which is a very tiny sample size, I know women, in different places that I go to, whether it's, the local dance studio where there's a kid there who is a young person who's a dancer and she's going to MIT. When I look at the people that I know, I'm not overwhelmed by this negativity. But again, I think when you're looking at large samples, the whole country, there's a lot of people that I don't see. But again, I think the statistics, for example, the one about 10 hours a day of using the media.
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't see that in West Marin. I mean, we're kind of in a bubble here. I think the whole Bay Area is kind of a bubble.
But I was reading about that, and lumped into the 10 hours is things like listening to music, and even doing educational things. Computer games. So when we think 10 hours, when I heard that in the promotion for the show, I was totally staggered because 10 hours is unbelievably long time. But again, exactly what are those 10 hours? If kids are listening to music and multitasking, I can't study and listen to music, but even when I was a kid, there were people who listened to the radio and did their math, So what I'm saying is that the statistics can sometimes confuse or exaggerate. And I think it's very important to use statistics, but I guess I'm saying I guess my bottom line is I don't think it's the worst of times, but I do think I agree with you that we need to do better.
Murray, this is Bernie.
Hi, Bernie.
I agree with your being a little skeptical on whether the fact there's a correlation is a causation. I mean, I see that. For me, the causation is very broad in a dysfunctional society. So I don't care about whether it's 9 hours or 10 hours or whatever. I definitely see the isolation of kids through the digital world, through this new media, et cetera, the new technology, completely changing how people and kids and adults interact and live, and so there's a lot of change in our culture. But I also see, that wars have been going on a long time, but in our military we have huge suicide rates. Those don't have anything to do with male or female as much as the dysfunction of us fighting a war, that the people fighting it ultimately lose their belief that it's a just war. And I think there's a lot in our culture that is putting pressure that includes, will I get a job? Will I be able to support myself? Can I in many ways? So it's a very big issue. But Murray, on the issue of femininity, doesn't it bother you that a lot of women that we see feel a need to really sexualize themselves to feel like somehow they're important and get noticed, etc.?
I'm losing contact. So I want to say, while I question this is the worst of times, I think this is the best of programs. So I'm very happy.
Thanks, Murray.
I'm very happy because it's the only show I listen to that makes me go and talk to people and read more. So I'm not just saying that it's fun to listen to. It actually makes me think. So.
Well, it's callers that make it for us, so thanks for being a frequent caller.
Okay, talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Murray.
So Murray is challenging a little bit whether we aren't, in some ways, calling it...
But I said the best of times and the worst of times.
Yeah.
Well, obviously,
so you see the progress.
We couldn't even vote. Women couldn't even vote a very short time ago.
And that was when we stopped owning you. After a while.
I don't know about that.
Not so sure about that.
No, well, there was a time where it was felt like the man owns the wife. I'm not saying that to be clever or anything. I really think that was part of our history as a culture. And yes, we've come a huge way in that. I mean, it was akin to slavery. Yeah. And yet some men still feel that power to be in charge within the family and abuse their wives, abuse their girlfriends, and really push their weight around because somehow they feel that society gives them permission to do that.
And, it's good that men are the way they are in many, many ways, but it only becomes distorted when there's no balance given to the woman. I mean, I like a man to take charge in many, many ways, but I know that only works with me if they really listen and respect me and honor that aspect of our life together,
Our laws, though, now allow women to come forward, bring the power of the police and the government to bear on men who do rape and who do abuse in serious ways.
But also look how that's been shoved under the table, like with the Bill Cosby and with the fraternities. I mean, and what's the guy's name? The big coach from the what's his name?
Yeah.
Paternak or
Paterno,
was it
Joe Paterno?
Yeah,
Joe
Paterno.
The guy who was in charge of under Joe.
Yeah,
Paterno.
they all knew. They all knew about it. They knew about it for years, and nothing happened. So
that's that club of men, that club of powerful patriarchic men.
Alpha masks.
Yeah, and that is though being broken down, hopefully, because with women now, even if that's 17% in the Congress, there's plenty of powerful women there that get on the news and that can make their say and push back on all of those other people in the Congress who are trying to restrict the rights of women to choose their reproductive choices.
Yeah.
And I would just like to give kudos to Elizabeth Warren, who somehow managed to be a lovely, refined, gracious woman who kicks behind, and she really tells the truth in a wonderful way. I think she sets a great example for young women everywhere, for all women, that you can be powerful and gracious at the same time.
She, Teddy Roosevelt, speaks softly and carries a big stick.
Yeah.
The way and what she says is so sharp and powerful, but she doesn't say it in that boisterous way that a man might. Mm-hmm. So she comes at it with a easy to hear, easy to listen to, but really gets your attention with the point she's making. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why so many people really felt like maybe the time is right for a woman president, but maybe Hillary has gone too far up the main
masculine road,
masculine channel,
up the patriarchy road.
Yeah, but I'm not a big fan of Hillary anymore, but I want to say once again, I do appreciate what she has accomplished, just like I appreciate what Michelle Obama has accomplished as First Lady in this country.
God. She's amazing.
They have both set examples for young girls and women to look up to and how to be powerful and how not to abuse it. And Hillary had some tough times. I mean, it would have been easy for her to just divorce Crazy Bill, when he was in getting all his womanizing and troubles, but they made their choice. She made her choice, and she was dignified throughout the process, and still handles it with dignity. So I'm not saying vote for Hillary. I'm saying let's honor what she has done and accomplished as a leader in our country for many, many years.
Sure. So in states where reproductive rights and women's health care, the right to have health care, are being challenged.
Isn't that unbelievable?
And
unbelievable.
And in some of those states, it's women who are introducing the bills or who are supporting such things. I don't know where to lay the blame for that. It must be
the religion that is the patriarchy.
Yes, right.
Let's be honest about it. A lot of those women are caught up in a religion that practices patriarchy every Sunday, if not more often.
Right.
And there is so much thou shalt kind of stuff going on, and therefore the guilt is placed on the parishioners and the followers in that religion if they don't subscribe to what's coming from the top. And what's coming from the top didn't necessarily reflect the message that, say, Jesus would have given, but it's what the church, through its hierarchy and patriarchy over the years, has accumulated as power as a way to manipulate people.
All those supposedly celibate guys.
Yeah. I would like to acknowledge the Pakistan wonder Malala, because with her comment that, what the Taliban fears most of all is a young girl with a book. And using that as a model and thinking about solutions, how do we turn this around without waiting for the whole apocalypse and everything to fall and whatever. And it seems to be education. And it seems to be that if there were either organizations or schools or both that brought in women of accomplishment who are still embracing the feminine qualities that the world so desperately needs right now, and having them come to the schools and having them come to these organizations and talking to the girls and letting them know what they went through and what they value and how they did manage to accomplish what they've accomplished, that this could have a wonderful impact. And that's my contribution to a possible part of a solution.
And
because girls have to know that women like this exist. They aren't exposed to them. And if they are in such an intimate setting, it can have a big impact.
And it's all the more powerful because it's coming from a young woman. In other words, the young girls, I think, are most influenced when another young woman that they can relate to comes forward. So anyway, good point, Mary. Thank you.
Okay, well, I just want to thank all our listeners and the callers that called in today for your participation. I hope you'll turn in every Thursday at 11 because your voice really does matter.